Well, hello, and this is going to be the first of too many small, short segments of recorded lecture. So, what I've done, what I will do is put up the PowerPoint online by itself, and then I will break that into sections where I will record some of the information for you, and then the rest of it we'll do in our Zoom session. So this is the biology class, Bio 4, general majors for biology. And so I guess what we should do is maybe start with what biology means, and that is the study of life. So the big question is, what is life? And here I have two pictures. And what we want to do is really kind of separate one from the other, what makes one living and one not. And so what we'll do is we'll actually talk about this during our first Zoom. So we'll spend a little bit of time on this slide. What I do want to do, though, is go through and talk about what the 7 properties of life actually are. At least these are the ones that are agreed upon in most biology books. So we have 7 of them that I want you to know. And we'll start with the first one, which is included in all these pictures. I forgot this slide was there. So yeah, starting out great. But anyway, so there are 7 altogether, and some I think are easier to understand than others. So we'll start with the first one, and reproduction. And some of you thought, oh, that's what we got to start with, because sex is the reason for life. So here we have some examples of reproduction. We're going to start the course with beetle sex. There on the left, those are actually beetles, and so leave that to your imagination. On the top right, hopefully that is the products of reproduction, because if not, that is just wrong on so many levels. So a father and daughter. On the bottom left is bacteria reproducing, and this is asexual reproduction, which we'll talk about later in the semester. The word mitosis that many of you have heard, we will learn, and some of you are already cringing. I know that can be slow and boring, but important, and we'll try to liven it up a little bit. And then the bottom right, we're showing you a picture of a flower, and that's actually a reproductive structure found in plants. And so one of the things we'll do is look at that, and when we talk about male or female, that flower right there is actually both. You can see both male and female parts. And I don't know if you can see my pointer, but the green long thing on the bottom of that is actually the female structure. And then those yellow structures are anthers, which produce sperm, and that is actually the male structure. So this is actually both sexes. All right, so reproduction is one. The second one would be order. And this one's a little bit harder to, I think, understand. What we find is there's lots of different atoms and molecules in the environment. That's the chemistry portion that we'll do a little bit talk about. But what we find is, in most cases, and it's not always true, but in most cases, living things tend to take those molecules, take those atoms, and organize them in patterns that you don't necessarily strictly see out in the environment in non-living things. So you have this different organization, and we use those organization qualities to describe things, to classify things. So up over on the left, we have a monarch butterfly. You can see the scales on the wings. They're usually typically in some kind of pattern that we can recognize, and that's how we'll ID things like butterflies by their color patterns and structures. On the right, I don't know if you've ever noticed what that is. That is a shell. That shell actually is from a nautilus. It is actually from a cephalopod, which is related to an octopus. It is one of the only external shelled cephalopods or octopi that exist today. So we'll talk about that later in the semester. On the bottom left is a flower. It's in the aster family, and you can see the different petals it has on it. And there is a organized number that typically they have. Again, we use that number to help us classify things. And then on the bottom right is actually a little bit tougher. That is plant tissue, and that will go heavily in Bio 2, the plant and animal course. We don't really talk about it here, but what you're seeing is something called xylem and phloem in what's called a dicot plant, which you don't need to know now, but you can see the big red cross kind of in the middle, the big red X, that is the xylem that moves water up a plant. And then on the sides and top and bottom are these little greener areas, kind of, and that would be phloem that actually moves food down a plant. And so something that you do a heck of a lot more detail in a botany course or a plant and animal biology course. All right, the third one would be growth and development. All living things tend to grow and develop. So up on the top left, we see a cool picture of a snake coming out of an egg. Snakes can be live born, or different species actually are laid in an egg, a little bit different than a chicken egg. But here you see a snake emerging from a leathery like egg. On the top right, those are, I believe, frog eggs. And so you can see them going through their first divisions through mitosis. On the bottom left, that is actually a dicot seed, and you can actually see the roots growing out with root hairs. And then on the bottom right is obviously deer and a baby, and the baby's nursing and getting larger. And if it is a Disney movie, then mom's looking at the hunter right now because Walt Disney had mom issues. If you don't believe me, go back and watch Bambi or pretty much lots of the early movies where the kids were orphaned. So growth and development. All right, the next one is energy processing. So all living things need to take in energy. On the left-hand side, you're seeing a picture really of a forest with light. Light is really the ultimate source of energy for all living things on the planet. And we'll talk about that through photosynthesis. That'll be on exam 2. On the right, we actually have, top right, we have a mosquito. And that would be getting energy by sucking blood. And that is actually a female, and you can tell by looking between the back leg. No, I'm kidding. You can actually tell because the females are the only ones that feed on blood. That blood is for energy for eggs. And then on the bottom left, that cat there, that would be actually a leopard, the smallest large cat. And obviously it's sitting on some kind of antelope. And then on the bottom right would be the cute cuddly koala that is eating eucalyptus. That is its diet. And, they're cute, they're cuddly, and that thing would actually try to rip your face off if it could. So, but anyway, so there you go, energy processing. The next one in your book is labeled as regulation. I like to introduce the term homeostasis. Homeo means the kind of level the same, and stasis is kind of its position. So the idea here is we all try to keep homeostasis, some kind of balance in our bodies. The examples I'm showing you here is just one variable, and that variable would be temperature. And I use that because we're kind of hooked into that. Most of us know, that our bodies try to maintain a constant temperature. That constant temperature, I want you to think right now, what do you think that is? And most of you probably would say 98.6. That is the kind of the number that goes around. I will tell you that number is wrong. It turns out most people, the average body temperature is slightly lower than that. That 98.6 was done years ago. It was actually taken from like 100 people. So the variable number the test number was very, very low. We're finding that's probably a tad bit high for people. But anyway, so, it's a good standard though. It's not that bad. And so, we always talk about temperature, and you want to keep your temperature below 100 and things like that. So anyway, so our body tries to maintain that temperature, and we'll talk about that for exam 2. So on the left-hand side here, we have hippopotamus. a very large animal. And so they spend most of their day in the water, trying to stay cool. On the right is actually a dragonfly, and you see its butt's up in the air. And actually, what it's doing is warming its body temperature. Insects are ectothermic, and again, we'll talk about that later. But in the morning, you'll see these guys do this, and they're trying to heat up. And so what they're doing is they'll put their butt in the air, uh, directed toward the sun, to raise that body temperature fairly quickly. All right, and then two more. One is response to the environment, and living things do respond in some general way, even though it looks like some things don't. If you're watching, um, uh, some things just seem to be sitting there, but they are monitoring temperature and the amount of water, things like that. So here we got response to the environment. Uh, for some reason, in the book, one of the older editions used chimpanzee. These guys are actually making tools. They're using modified sticks to actually eat termites. And then on the bottom, we have a Venus flytrap, and it's a plant, but they are able to move quickly and in response to the environment. If an insect that is large enough but not too large actually touches some fine hair sensors within specialized structures, they will close. And they're using that to get actually nitrogen. These things live in nitrogen poor soils, and so they use nitrogen from animals to supplement that. So, and then the last one is evolutionary adaptations. And for some, that this is a little bit difficult because we're also looking at making changes. And I want to make sure you understand the difference between this one and the one before it. So let me go back real quick. The response to the environment is something that is done quickly. And, quickly doesn't mean that you have to respond at that second. Because sometimes if you poke something, it just sits there. But it's within a very, very quick, reasonable amount of time. Whereas this evolutionary adaptations, this is long term. These are long term changes for survival. And so up on the left, I usually ask people what that is, and I'll give you a second to think about it. And a lot of people come up with it as a seahorse, and that is what it looks like. And it is closely related, but actually it's considered to be a sea dragon. And a sea dragon is a little bit more fragile. These guys live typically in kelp or algae, and so they blend in better. This picture was obviously taken with a black background. And they're cool. They're really, really interesting animals. The Long Beach Aquarium, or the Aquarium of the Pacific, or whatever we're calling it now, the one down in Long Beach, they actually have successfully raised these in captivity. I think they were the first ones to do that. They've been very successful. Multiple tanks now down there. So really cool little guys. And then on the right is a nighthawk. It's a bird. These guys are insect eaters. They come out in the evening and mornings to fly around and eat insects. And the curious thing is they spend their downtime during the day on the ground. And so they just sit there, and you can see this guy sitting on a sandy, rocky area, and they blend in very well. There's the eye right there. There's the beak. And they're real cool little guys. We went out bird watching one time looking for these guys, and it was the evening time. We're standing around in this road that they're known to hunt on all the time. And the amazing thing, we stood there for 10 minutes, and then one of us moved, took a step off the road a little bit, and this thing flew up, scared the crap out of everybody. So we had been standing next to this thing for 10 minutes, and none of us actually saw it. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, so those are the 7 properties of life that I want you to know. And we're going to talk about the smallest unit of life. Is it a cell or a virus? So that is something also we will talk about during the Zoom session. So with that, I am going to stop the share, and I am going to then stop the recording.